Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for being here today. I'm so excited to learn about your book.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's just jump in. Tell me your genre, your book, everything about you.
Okay, where do I start? Well, my book is She Runs with Wolves. This is my first published book, and it is a fantasy slash sci-fi dystopian novel, and it's about this not young woman. I guess say 28, 29, 30, who is kind of captive. Well, so basically, so let's set the setting first. So we're basically into the future. It's post-apocalyptic. We're in the desolate winter, and basically, it's kind of like this tribal feel. So it's heavily influenced by Mad Max and all those genres. If you enjoy that type of material. And so basically, yeah, so we're thrown into this setting, and this young woman who's a captive of the evil king discovers that she's pregnant, and she doesn't want to submit her child to the same atrocities that she has endured. So she plans her escape, and that's kind of where we start the book. And so she escapes, and she falls into the hands of this underground religious cult, which she doesn't know much of, but then realizes that she's playing like a center part of it. And all the while, she's like unraveling physically, emotionally, and she doesn't understand, but her body is basically shutting down. And she kind of discovers that she's going to have to give up part of who she is if she wants to save her baby, save the cult, save everything. And so the question at that point becomes like, is she willing to sacrifice everything, not knowing? So in all that mix, we have some artificial intelligence. We have 3 wolves that will guide her, and all that good stuff. And for those that are sensitive, I will say that there is some heavy violence. So there's a lot of blood. I do enjoy my killing. So there's a lot of blood and a lot of violence, and she's pretty badass. So the main character, Ira, is pretty badass. So.
Very cool. It sounds like definitely an adult book.
Yep.
But definitely also something that you can dig into and enjoy thoroughly.
Well, it's like a new adult book with, so basically that it's funny that you should say that, because I really, really enjoy young adult novels. And I will include in that like Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice and all that, the coming of age, young women who kind of discover their true potential as they go through a series of events, right? So I really enjoy that. And I enjoyed it when I was, a young, teenager and everything. But as I got older, and I love rereading old books that I enjoy, for example, Pride and Prejudice. But what I found was that as I got older, I didn't necessarily have. So when you read these young female protagonists, they start off, they're like 15, 16, and by the end of the novel, they're maybe, a year older, so 17, 18, and they have it all figured out. And I'm like, I was here, pregnant at 30, 30 about. And I was like, I have nothing figured out. And, now it's like many years down the road, and I still have got nothing figured out. So I found that I was kind of like, I kind of found that I kind of outgrew those tropes and those things, but I still enjoyed them. And I outgrew them because I was like, well, I'm still stuck. And how come they got it all figured out? Until I realized that not many people, not many women have it figured out. It's not that simple. And there's always questions, and there's always that, am I doing it right? Or is this how it should be done? Or I feel like, my life, isn't moving the direction that I wish it was moving in. So all those questions were still there, and nothing was figured out. So that's why this was kind of like the instigation for this book, is that I felt like writing a book that hit all those themes that I thoroughly enjoy in young adult novels, but with an older protagonist, somebody that looked and felt like me, you know, and that had the same questions, and that was like, okay, so this is a more mature novel asking the same questions, and I kind of can relate because I'm that age, right? So that's where it all started from. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. I love it. That's very cool, because you're right. Like, at every stage of life, there is that other adventure, other question, other, you know, where am I going next?
Yeah.
I really don't have the next stage figured out, or I don't really have a plan for this phase of my life. And yet, on all those changes bring about all those questions. So
exactly.
I love the fact that you brought it into that old character. I do have a question from what you were talking about before. So you're talking about running with wolves. Are these actual wolves, or are these werewolf characters?
No, they're actual wolves. Okay. So there's no werewolf. Yeah, it has nothing to do with werewolves. So they're actual wolves, and they're meant, so I don't want to say too much. So basically they're meant as guides. They're meant as, so basically, you know, it all stemmed from like me loving, so I'm from Canada and I live in Quebec, and we all love wolves. So I may be generalizing, but anyways, I'm a wolf fanatic, and wolves and moose and all those big majestic animals. So, and all that spiritual connection, you know, with our First Nations people who inculcated those really amazing beliefs that still hold true for many people here today. So I really wanted to integrate all of that into the book. So they're basically there as guides, as helpers, as so she will kind of like identify through those wolves, and they're meant to be really cool, and they're meant to, you know, show her the way to her true self.
I definitely got that spirit animal vibe as you were talking.
Yes, cool. Cool. Well, it's because, so basically when I wrote this, my cultural background is Celtic. So my name is Hennessy. I have Irish lineage, Scottish lineage. So basically Celtic, Gaelic, all of that. So it was really important for me to incorporate all of that into the book, but I'm also Canadian. And as a Canadian, I'm influenced by First Nations people, by my French background from, you know, Europe, France, and all that. So it was really important for me to incorporate all of that. And so we'll notice right in the book from the start, you know, right off the bat, we're like, so, and that's another thing that I wanted to play with, is that what I really enjoyed about post-apocalyptic and exploring a desolate future is that, how can I put this, is that I really enjoy the fact that we're in the future, there's relics of the past that are actually more advanced than where they are there. So we start the book, we're almost like pre-colonial. So we're in these long houses that the First Nations people would inhabit, you know, before we got the Europeans got here. So and I also incorporated, you know, the roundhouses from my Gaelic culture. So I really wanted to have like that melting pot of everything. So when we start exploring the setting, we really have this sense of a very thick history, a very thick past. And I'm exploring that from a futuristic point of view where everything is gone. There's nothing left. They have no idea what the past is. And we find all these relics, and they're living as pre-colonial because that's kind of like in our nature, but they have all this technology at the tip of their fingers that they don't know what to do with. So that was like another big part of the world building that I was doing. Very much inspired by my
I'm hooked, and I'm buying it right after this.
Oh, well, thank you. My gosh, thank you so much. Yes, it's very tribal history. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, and like I said, it's a mix of, you know, artificial intelligence. So basically the premise of the whole book when I started was it came from Einstein, who said, I don't know what world, I know how to go again. I forget now. I said it about 1,000 times, and now that I want to say it. So I don't know how World War III will be fought, but I do know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. So for me, that was like the premise. That was what instigated the whole thing, is that, okay, so you're in the future, you're fighting with sticks and stones, but we have all this technology that destroyed the planet. And that's exactly where we start off in the book. So yes, so well, thank you.
Very cool. It's reminding me of the book in the series, The 100. Have you watched that one?
Yeah, so yes, exactly. I didn't watch the whole series, but I did see part of it. And yes, there are definitely very similar tropes and things like that. And it's funny because I watched it after I wrote the book, because I was talking with someone and she said the same thing. And she's like, oh, that's really similar. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So I went and checked and I was like, oh, that sounds, yeah, it's like the same. So I was like, oh, well, great minds think alike. I'm just kidding.
It is a very gritty series as well, though. Like, I couldn't watch, and I kind of fell off because it was just getting too hard for me to watch all the atrocities that happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will do that when I'm reading, because I'm a faint of heart reader. So I'll just skim whatever I don't want to read and then go on with the plot line.
Well, then, you have my full permission to skim through those parts that you're like, this is too much for me. But yeah, towards the end, I have to say that you might be skimming a few not chapters, but a few paragraphs, because again, I take inspiration from everything around me. So, and I'm a huge movie buff. So as Quentin Tarantino said, he likes to steal. I like to borrow. So I borrow from scenes, and my background is screenwriting. So I'm a very scene, I don't know how you say that, but when I write paragraphs, it's like a scene that's unfolding in front of my eyes. So it's very visual. That's it. That's the word I was looking for. I'm a very visual writer. So yeah.
That background seems like it would help you tremendously in novel writing.
So yes, and I'd say no at the same time. Because so when you're writing a script, they're two different beasts, for sure. They're two different beasts that you don't, and I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, well, I know how to write screenplays. I'll definitely know how to write a book. And it's a totally different beast. So where in a novel, you can elaborate and develop and go into the character's mind and really suss out, minute details. You can't do that in a script, because you can't show a person thinking. Like, there's ways around it, but it's not recommended if you want, producers to read it, to go into full detail of he was thinking this or she was thinking that, because the person can't show it physically on screen. Well, okay, she was thinking about, committing suicide, for example. So you can't show that. So you have to be able, when you're writing a script, you have to be able to show every action. So my books are very action packed, and I was kind of criticized by a few readers saying, oh, well, there's not enough like character development. So I lacked on that part, because for me, it was kind of obvious, the character development, because I was like showing it, right? And so, but some readers really wanted me to dive into the psyche of that person. And I didn't have the natural inclination to do that, because I was used to writing scripts where I have to show it. And for me to show it and then explain it, it was like, I felt like it was overkill. I was like, well, I thought it would have been clear by the way that I show it, right? So now I know that in book 2, and there was also part of me that did it on purpose. So in book 1, I show a lot of this stuff, but in book 2, I'll be explaining a lot of this stuff. So yeah, so there was a bit of a conscious decision on my part, but also I recognized that perhaps my background was a little bit how can I put this? My background didn't give me the opportunity to do much character development as people like to see inside the person's mind and stuff. So it's very action packed, but it does definitely help in elaborating setting. So all of the comments were like, amazing world building. This is like amazing, because I'm literally seeing what I'm writing down, and people can actually, maybe close their eyes. Anyways, that's how I did it. You close your eyes and you can literally have like a 360 vision of, the village looks exactly like that, So there's, pros and cons to having, this screenwriting background, but definitely two different beasts that you attack differently. Yeah, for sure.
Right. I definitely wrote my first book that way too, because I was just writing it as I was sort of like seeing a movie in my head, and my editor was like, you have to take a lot of this dialogue out. and so, she kind of helped me through like explaining what the characters were feeling or why they did X, Y, or Z. Yeah, I think my first book was not, I don't have that background, but I just wrote it as I was seeing in my head.
It. Right.
And that's cool.
That's the other thing, is that, so my key to success is that I'm really good at dialogue, in the sense that I can literally hear the two people doing it. So I knew right away, okay, I can't be too dialogue heavy, because then you'll lose, the reader. So I was really careful in keeping the dialogue short and brief, and then having like you said, you have to have a good mix, a good balance of description, of dialogue, of plot, thickening and all that, and subplots and all that. And I think being a screenwriter first really helped me tie in all those subplots with the plot, because when you're writing a script, you're always pushing the plot forward. Whereas a book is not necessarily like that. So that's why my book is tight and it's lean, and it goes from one scene to the next, and you're really just moving along. So
fun. And you already answered my next question, because I was going to ask, is there a book 2?
Yes, so there is definitely going to be a book 2, because there are questions not answered and that we want to know. And I do end it a bit on a cliffhanger, but I made sure to answer a lot of the, so you answer some questions and you leave a few others open. So I did that. So there will be a book 2. I don't know if there'll be a book 3. I'll see how book 2 evolves. We'll see how book 2 evolves. Yeah.
And what is the name? Is it a series? Are you calling it a series?
Well, yeah. So it's the Pogrom War series. And the book 2 has a tentative title. I think it's called The Huntress. Shoot, I forget now. I had a few ideas, but I think it was along the lines of The Huntress Moon or something like that.
Okay.
Again, along the themes of hunting, hunters, a female huntress, wolves, and all that. So I think I'm leaning towards that one, but it can always change. We never know. Nothing's set in stone.
Very fun. Do you have a cover, or do you have a copy of your book sitting with you? If not, that's okay.
I don't. Sorry. Okay. No, I should have. But I guess because my kids are homeschooling right now, and I had to get them all ready, and I didn't realize that when we were going to do this that they'd be home. So I was like rushing to get their lunch ready. So I didn't think I didn't plan anything. I apologize.
That's okay. I can definitely put it up for later.
Okay, good. Thank you.
This is the question I love to ask all my authors, and I hope it doesn't take you by surprise. What do you want your readers to experience or take away from your book? Or from your book?
Pardon me?
Oh, from your book, I guess I said book. Yeah.
From my book. Okay. So I guess so so when I write scripts or books, I'm always looking not for a gimmick, but I like surprises. So I like reading and being like, what? I didn't expect that, So I always like to surprise my reader and, send them down one direction and then give them, a left turn. And they're like, what? I wasn't expecting this, but a fun left turn, So I think I really hope that when they read my book that they're surprised, that they're definitely, invested in the characters. I spent a lot of time on the two main characters and I really love them with all my heart. And I hope that when readers read them, that they love them too, with all their vulnerable. So this book is definitely the main, how do I put this? The French is battling the English right now. The main, thread, the main thread that's pulling everything together is vulnerability. So both characters are extremely flawed, extremely vulnerable. They make a lot of mistakes and people pay the price for their mistakes and a lot of people get hurt. But at the end of the day, they still get up and they still try to survive and they still try to make it, So I hope that people are as invested in the characters as I am, and that they enjoy the journey that, that they're on, basically. And that they can identify a little bit with the characters as well, So for me, a lot of people are like, oh, you're the main character, because a lot of authors write, and you can perhaps attest to this, a lot of authors, they write because their main character is a reflection. Well, maybe not their main character, but one of the characters is a reflection of, who they are. And they take a lot of what they have in and put it in the characters. So, and a lot of people are like, oh, do you identify with Ira? And I'm like, no, I pretty much identify with Dewar, the male protagonist in the book. But Ira is like the one I strive to become, she's like this, this beaten and she always falls down, but she always manages to get back up and be strong and, do her best. And so, yeah, so I really love my characters.
That's very cool that you did it that way. Like she is a reflection of where you want to go or who
I want to go.
Become.
Yeah, exactly.
Neat.
And yet when you read her, you'll be like, holy cow, she's like nothing to brag home about. Like she's just a mess, a mess of a human being. But I think that's what's beautiful about her. And that was another thing when I started all this thing, it was about doing a heavy contrast between, so what is beautiful can also be ugly, what is ugly can also be beautiful. And it was about, so if you go like on my, well, anyways, I'll say that maybe later. But yeah, so when I wrote this whole thing, there was also this playing in the back of my mind of beauty and ugliness and violence and peace and what looks fine, maybe not, all that it is. So there was a lot of that. And that's part of the reason why I love sci-fi, fantasy, dystopia, is that you get to ask all of those questions and explore and have fun with it, basically.
I'm hearing so many layers to this book. I can't wait to dive into it.
Oh, well, good. Thank you. Good. I hope I meet your expectations.
Tell the listeners or watchers where we can find you and that thread that you were about to say, maybe talking about your website.
Yes, that's right. Oh, yes, that's exactly where I was going. So yeah, everybody can find me at Kimberly T. Hennessy. So Kimberly LYT and Hennessy SSY. There's no E. .com, and you'll find that on the website so because of my film background, I was able to do a small short film, and so on the first page of the website you'll find a trailer for my book. And if you want to chat and discuss and everything, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is where I'm most prolific. And that's where all, my peers, my readers, and that's where they communicate with me. And by subscribing, you get access to like the whole short film. yeah, and that's where people, I mean, I'm also on Facebook, Kimberly T. Hennessy, again, author, on Instagram. And yeah, Instagram, I'm not super good with social media. So I do tend to go on it, but not as prolific as my newsletter, which is once a month. And that's where I talk about movies that I've seen recently or books that I've read and things like that. And that's where people, that's where we talk and shoot the breeze.
That sounds like tons of fun. Do you feel like, okay, you talked about the film piece, which hello, can you make me a movie trailer from my book?
Yeah, well, that one was because I had the team. This was during my university. When I was doing my master's degree a few years ago, and I had this whole team with me. So it's a pretty, how can I put this? It's not the typical trailer that we see. So unfortunately, yeah, it takes a bit of budget to.
I can imagine.
Yeah, takes a
That's
bit of.
That's very fun. Oh wow, I can't wait to see it. And do you feel like novel writing was a natural progression of your career, or did you always see it going that way?
Well, so I started off when I was pregnant. I started off wanting to write novels, and I thought naively that once my baby was born, she would sleep and I would write and it would be wonderful. It didn't turn out like that at all. She had she had an allergy to the bovine protein. So anytime I would breastfeed her, she would have terrible stomach aches. So for the first 6 months of being a new mom, she literally cried day and night. So there was no way I was going to be able to write a book. And then when we figured out what was wrong, she transformed and was this loving little baby who was not in pain anymore. But I realized that she wasn't a heavy sleeper. So there was never any chunk of time where I could literally sit down. And for novel writing, you at least need 2 hours. One, like maybe half an hour just to get back into what you wrote the night before. And then, edit for, another hour and a half, whatever you wrote, or if you prefer, to write new stuff. But there has to be a point where you need to sit down and kind of review what you've been doing because you don't know how to start where you left off, right? So you kind of have to get back into it. So I was like, this is not working. And so I started thinking, I was like, maybe I could write scripts. So I was thinking about that all the while trying to write my novel. Then I got pregnant a second time. And again, like I said, this was me. This was like maybe 4 years where I'm trying to write novels. It's not working. And I'm still learning the ropes, still trying to figure out how to get it done, and then get pregnant, a second time and realizing, okay, this isn't working. And then deciding, okay, I'm going to try scripts. So I already had a story in my mind that I wanted to write as a novel. And I just said, I'm going to take that and I'm going to write it as a script. And as a script, you don't need to have 2 hours ahead of you. You can really just dive in, write. It's sparse. I mean, 1 page equals a minute in a movie. So basically, you have a maximum big, that's like huge maximum of 120 pages. Like you'd never get a script for 120 pages. A producer would look at it and say, this is way too long, So it's like 100 pages. And so 100 pages is easy to easy to read, and easy to type because there's dialogue. So when you're doing character descriptions, it's 2 lines max, and then your dialogue takes up most of the space. And then when you're describing a setting, again, maximum 2 lines. So much simpler, very structured, so easy to do. So I kind of dove into that, studied for it, studied producing, screenwriting, and decided to go towards that. But my first love had always been, writing novels. It's just that I never, with the children at home, I was at home, I was studying screenwriting. There was just no time to get back to it. So it was only once my son started grade school and my daughter was already in school that I had time to look at it. So that was, So now he's in grade 6, and it took me 3 years to write this novel because I was also relearning how to do it all, right? So it took me a good, I'd say 8 months, 6 to 8 months to write it, and then another 2 years to edit. So it was basically, a lot of editing, and I can't tell you how many times I rewrote the whole book because I was like, sucks. So start over, start from scratch. And then, and so 3-4 years down the road, I had my very first novel, and I was like, okay, I think the next one won't take me as long, hopefully. So, but yeah, initially, and then with my background in screenwriting, I figured, I was like, now that I know how to budget a movie and everything like that, I can maybe write a novel and then write the screenplay to go with the novel. So it was always like a question of maybe I could do both. But we'll see. I used to put all this pressure on myself to get things done because I was getting older and I felt like I need to achieve something. And now I'm at just the point where, you know what? I'm just happy being able to write, being able to touch people. If they enjoy the book, that's great. If they don't, that's okay too. You can't please everyone, and just not put all that pressure on me because I was spending like so much time in front of the computer just because I needed to get it done and I wanted it to get done. And I was getting depressed because I was spending, when you're working from home, you can literally wake up in the morning, sit in front of your computer, and then at night it's like, it's 4 o'clock, you barely ate. And then you're like, your brain is totally wired because it's been staring at a screen for like 8-9 hours straight. I was like, I'm getting depressed, and I was not enjoying the process anymore because I was putting so much pressure. So now I'm trying to live a much more balanced, well-rounded life where I have interests other than just writing, because it was getting too much.
Yeah, it can be a lot. I live in my characters' heads a lot, and sometimes it makes for good writing, but sometimes you have to step away.
You really do. And I find that if you limit chunks of time to write, you might be even more productive than if you just sit down at the computer for 9 hours and go like, okay, so what am I going to write? Because you have all this time ahead of you. But if you actually, put some time and you say like, okay, I have 2 hours to do this, then you'll be like, I need to get it done. And like you said, even when you walk away from the computer, you're still thinking about it. So it's always on your brain. So it's too much. And you need to find, a balance.
With the subject matter, was it hard for you to write too? I have 2 dystopian books in a series, and it was really hard for me to write because I had to put my characters through some really bad things. And so once I finished writing the dystopian book, I was like, okay, now I'm writing a romance because I can't go back there yet. And but my dystopian had a pandemic in it. So for obvious reasons, I just kind of put that on the shelf for a while.
Yeah. Going through the motions. It's like, it's enough. I guess there was, I found, so for me, writing like the violent scenes and things like that, again, I'm so visual. It's like I'm watching a movie. So it's really about the mechanics. So, and then all those emotions that are going through the character while this is happening, she was on adrenaline, right? So she's not really going through those emotions. So now we're going to be getting through the process of dealing with those emotions. So perhaps I will be, it will be more of a test. She does go through some painful moments, and I'll have to say that yes, it was tough to tap into that. There were moments where I'm like, there's a tear shedding, and I'm like, oh, so sorry, and things like that. But because she's such a trooper and she knows that she can't fall apart, she definitely has a stiff upper lip, and she just trudges through because she has to survive. So she's a survivor. What I did find tough to write is that because we're in the future and we're looking at relics from the past that are more advanced than they are, I didn't have a language for it. So often the characters find, I don't know, like a fridge, but they don't know what a fridge is. So I can't say, oh, this is a fridge, because the character doesn't know it's a fridge. So I had to find like these really creative ways of explaining what the character is looking at and making sure that the reader can kind of go like, oh my God, she's looking at a fridge, right? So that I found hard because I had to find words and practically invent words to be able to discuss the setting. So yeah.
Interesting. That's a very cool.
Yeah.
Something I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I found, like, for example, you know, there's a scene, I won't say too much, but there's a scene where, you know, it's kind of like a hall of mirrors, but it's not mirrors, right? So, and they don't say the word mirror, but they can see their reflection. And so I describe what they're looking at in their reflection. And I think, I won't say it because if you're going to read it, I don't want to sell you on it. But yeah, so it's really explaining, you know, what they're looking at and trying to find creative ways to make sure that the reader gets what they're looking at. So.
Well, it sounds to me like a great book, and I can't wait to dig in. And I think a lot of our listeners will feel the same way. You've already told us where we can find you, Kimberly T. Hennessy, on your website, as well as Facebook, and you have some cool extras for your newsletter subscribers.
Yep.
Is there any last words or any last tidbits you want to give us?
Well, thank you so much for having me again. Thank you to all the readers that are interested, and even those that are not interested. If you do like the genre and you're like, oh, well, that's not my kind of book, please come and talk to me. I'm like, I love pretty much everything. Like right now, I just finished watching The Witcher. I'm like in love with The Witcher. So if you want to talk about The Witcher, if you want to talk about Dune, I watched Dune a few months ago. That was amazing. And so, yeah, if you know, She Runs with Wolves is not your cup of tea, well, you know, I have a whole set of cup of teas, so we can talk about anything. But yeah, please feel free to contact me and just talk.
Fun. I love all those too. I just saw Dune the movie last week, so
yes,
yeah, that was very cool.
So good. The movie Dune or Witcher?
I saw the movie Dune. Yeah,
oh.
I haven't, like, I tried to start watching The Witcher, and I don't know why it didn't. But I only watched like a few minutes of it, so maybe I need to go back and try again. So.
Did you watch the first season, or the second one?
I think I watched the first episode, but
okay. So anyways, first season way better. Second season was all right, but I really have a thing for Henry Cavill, so I'm like, oh my God, he's so sexy. But yeah, the second season, I have to say that not him, but I don't know, I found that the storyline wasn't as tight and as in the first season. So I found that there not much happened in the second season. So I wasn't as impressed, as the first season, especially since I had read the books from the first season. And I found that they had done a fantastic job of adapting the whole thing. And then in this one, I was like, they kind of muffed up on it. But Dune, oh my God, what an incredible adaptation, right?
I have to confess, I didn't read the book, or I didn't read it, and I didn't watch the first movie, so I have no frame of reference. But I loved it. So.
You loved it? Okay, well, so I'm not surprised because I loved it too. But see, my husband didn't read the book, and me throughout the whole movie, I'm going, oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, this is amazing. It's incredible. And he's like, well, it's a bit slow. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? How is it? It's not slow. But maybe had you not, like, and then that's what I thought. I was like, well, maybe if he didn't read the books, for him, I guess it is kind of slow. But so you enjoyed it regardless. So.
Yeah, because I think it was 3 hours, right? And then I never sit still for 3 hours. So. And
you were like fine with it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, it's for me anyways, like and that's part of the love of screenwriting and writing novels, is seeing how masters like Denis Villeneuve managed to take this complicated book, like you know, when I was reading, I was like, what's happening here? And I had to go back, and because there's so many names, right? And you get lost and you're like, who are we talking about? So I really enjoyed the book because the level of complexity and the world building and all that is just mind boggling. And I'm in total awe of the book. But to adapt it is not easy. And the proof is that, you know, the first, now David, I have Fincher in my head, but shoot, the first director that did it, anyways, I forget his name. You know, he kind of bungled it up. It wasn't the movie that he wanted to make, but still, I mean, there were really, it wasn't the best. So when Denis Villeneuve, you know, he brings that to the silver screen, and you're like, oh, it's a beautiful work of art. I'm in total admiration of this man. He's just such a good, and he does so many sci-fi stuff that is just right in my cup of tea. So I'm in love with Denis Villeneuve. I don't know if you can tell.
Well, it's so great that you are here. I appreciate you talking with us today, and I look forward to reading your book.
Well, thank you so much. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to have been here. So thank you.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you as well.
Good.
Thanks.
Thanks.